An intergalactic war has found its way to the doorstep of planet Earth. It may be July, but the mood going around is much more like the dread as fall finally fades into winter. As the firefight begins above the atmosphere, one of the strange purple ships takes a hit and goes crashing into Earth, the antimatter within it detonating, annihilating an entire city in a flash of energy and light. The order goes out to mobilize the ARC ships. Project Exodus must begin and get as many humans as possible to the safety of another world. Eventually, those lucky enough to get on a ship turn back as they see the planet that all of humanity had grown up on finally succumb to the fire as Earth detonates and millions of voices cry out in pain. The remnants of humanity now face the blackness of space, and the cold December wind sets in. Happy December, gamers! Welcome to the month of mimetic wins. I might be making the obvious X joke here, but funnily enough, it's Xenoblade 2's big day when this video releases. Happy second birthday, XC2. But at the same time, we can't actually forget X, because its international release was the exact same week, and it will be celebrating its 4th birthday on Wednesday the 4th. My original plan was to do X videos for each of its birthdays, but on the anniversary of its Japanese release in April, and then do something similar for Xenoblade 2 the first week of each December. And while I did do something for X this year under that idea, I instead decided to do a bit of a bigger thing celebrating both of them at the same time, since very few of my viewers are from Japan, so it wouldn't really make sense that I'm all of a sudden celebrating X's birthday half a year away from when you remember it releasing. So here, I want to discuss something that's been overlooked by everyone, as far as I can tell, and only applies to X and 2 out of the entire Xeno series. The idea of transitioning to HD. X was Monolith Soft's first HD game besides support work on Pikmin 3, and I'm not sure if any people actually worked on both games. It is visually very impressive, and overall feels like a generational improvement over Xenoblade 1 on a technical level. The fact that they had a very long time to work on this definitely helped with that. It released 5 years after Xenoblade 1, and the only games Monolith was lead developer on in that period were the Project Cross Zone games, which were for 3DS. Project Cross Zone 2 did release a few months after X, but it was within the same year, so there was obviously a lot of overlap with the development there. X I consider a genuinely impressive feat. Its world is 5 times the size of Xenoblade 1, while also going completely seamless open world with one exception. Draw distance is increased, it has a frame rate that rarely drops, far less than 1 ever did, and just overall looks very impressive for a Wii U game. Frame rate wise, X is actually the only game in the series so far where you actually have to try somewhat to get it to happen, while in the other games, and especially Xenoblade 1, you'll get frame drops just by hitting a large amount of enemies with a flashy attack, or a couple areas that cause it to chug a bit. The things it definitely does take a hit in, though, are lighting, polygon count on models of non-humanoid things, besides skells, and cutscene animation, relying almost entirely on stock animations that are pretty much thrown to characters at random, and static angles, with only a few scenes of tailor-made animation, but of course what little of that there is fantastic, and it's hard to imagine them making unique stuff for all the affinity missions and all the generic quests with just how much content there is in the game. The one big thing that really does draw me out of the experience is how other party members use the exact same running animation as the avatar, regardless of size or body shape or personality. It just draws me a little bit out of the experience to see everyone running an exact perfect formation doing the exact same thing behind me in the field. But other than that, these are definitely overlookable flaws, and that one's just a minor annoyance. The other big downside to this, of course, is the file size, which is straight up too big for some models of Wii U to handle, which is 100% Nintendo's fault for giving tiny Wii U's, though even the disc version requires a download of several gigabytes to work reasonably well. Also, another compliment, online is surprisingly good by Nintendo standards, which is kind of insane since they've never made an online game before or since by themselves. Monolith has worked on Splatoon, but Splatoon's its other different beasts that also definitely deserves better online than it got, but I digress. Overall, I think you have to say they adapted to HD development phenomenally and pushed the Wii U pretty close to its limits, in part because they were given the time to figure things out. Remember, they also redid the entire story and still got the game out with only one delay, albeit one that might have been as much as a year. They would not be so lucky for their next game. Xenoblade 2's development was weird. There's no other way to put it. Even before a massive chunk of the team was taken to help fix Breath of the Wild, using things they'd learned from X, of course, the game was planned to be rushed from the get-go. Takahashi states a desire from both Monolith and Nintendo to have a major RPG release for the Switch very early in its life cycle, and they originally wanted to do that with X and the Wii U, but ran into delays, so this time they had to try and figure out a way to do things faster. This resulted in them building Xenoblade 2 on top of the architecture, no pun intended, of X. That is what a translated interview said, and it's not 100% sure, but this seems to mean using a modified version of the game engine that X ran on. This is a bit of a weird choice, because the Wii U was very different to the Switch architecture-wise, and future Nintendo consoles will probably be more like the Switch than the Wii U, i.e., intelligently developed with modern architecture and components instead of just basically being a bunch of GameCubes duct taped together. But they probably didn't have time to make a new engine to better take advantage of the Switch and still hit that 2017 release. It does still make some technical improvements despite using the same resolution and frame rate, and of course having more frame drops. Polygon count and character models is higher, lighting, collision, and textures are all better, though some of that might have to do with going for a cel-shaded style that resulted in some textures not needing to be as detailed to look as good. Things like characters' hair moving is present when they weren't before, overall better detail, and more cutscenes are animated better. But you could definitely tell it was rushed. Besides things that aren't a technical thing, like the quality of life stuff that was missing at launch, there were some technical problems. It's definitely the buggiest game in the series, has a lot more frame drops than X, as I've been saying before, and the less animated scenes do tend to look worse than the less animated X scenes. Also, handheld mode, the game just wasn't optimized for it. We all know the horror stories. It might have something to do with using a Wii U engine, I'm not 100% sure on that. Patches did come to fix some stuff, but there are still some issues, and handheld was never fully fixed. Torna, of course, was noticeably better than Xenoblade 2. It apparently used a new rendering engine, but based on the fact that it reuses so much from the base game, it was likely not an entirely new ground-up game engine, but rather rendering things better than the Xenoblade 2 iteration. There's definitely less frame drops too, despite Torna, the area, being much larger and more seamless than most Xenoblade 2 areas. In an interview about Torna, Takahashi drew attention to better grass and said that what was used for Torna was in the process of being refined for future games, meaning that future things would look even better, but in order to retain coherence with Xenoblade 2 and also get it out on time, Torna just used this version. It's likely that one of the future games he alluded to was Xenoblade 1's Definitive Edition, which does seem to be running on something Xenoblade 2 related, and already looks like it'll equal or surpass that game with its visuals. We could see how far they've already come in a decade just by seeing how much better DE looks than the original game. But what about the future even beyond that? The engine still needs to be fully optimized for the Switch. It might be by Definitive Edition, or that could use another partial refinement since it's a remake/remaster of an older game, which might be less demanding, but Monolith needs to be allowed to cut loose. X was held back by the Wii U, obviously, anything on the Wii U was held back by the Wii U compared to the Switch. 2 was rushed and had a smaller team. Torna, by definition, had to be smaller in scope and rely a lot on 2. Definitive Edition is largely constrained by the Wii game that it's based on. We need to see what they can do when given the chance to make something for the Switch that is as unrestrained by outside factors as X was for the Wii U. We haven't seen them go all out yet, We haven't seen them really push the Switch with all the knowledge that's been gained for the years it's been out yet, and while Breath of the Wild 2 will probably come out before the next Xenoblade game besides DE, and will probably make some great strides in that direction, I want to see an X2 do the same thing with Switch that X1 did for the Wii U. Make Xenoblade X2, please. That's the message of this video. So, yeah. That's basically it. I don't know why I chose to celebrate two Xenoblade games that released within a week of each other by sort of talking about their shortcomings, I guess you could say. But it's more of a, yeah, these games aren't perfect, but that doesn't make me love them any less. And wow, look at how far we've come. The Xeno series can really be split up into two eras at this point. You've got the pre-Xenoblade era and the post-Xenoblade era. Xenogears and Xenosaga are closer to each other than they are to Blade anything, and then all the Blades are one coherent series that's actually managed to keep going for a decade, which is impressive by Xeno standards. But it's kind of interesting that at this point, the Blade era is going to have lasted longer than there was just Xenogears or just Xenogears and Xenosaga. Just an interesting thing to think about, and there's definitely a video about how Xenogears needs to be brought back coming out soon. So, if you wanted that, oh boy, that's coming. And until next time, this is Luxin, signing off.